Welcome to the John Williams Global Masterclass series, a place where awareness becomes transformation because your life doesn't change by accident. It changes when you do. I'm John Williams, and welcome to today's masterclass. Before we begin, let's just take a moment to remember where we left off last week. In our last masterclass, we discovered that the picture you hold of yourself, your self-image, quietly influences every decision you make. We talked about what I call the internal mirror, because the person you see in that invisible mirror determines how you show up in the world. We discovered something really important. You'll rarely outperform the picture you hold of yourself, but that raises another question. If your self-image controls your future, where did your self-image come from? Because you weren't born believing you weren't good enough. You weren't born believing money was difficult to find. You weren't born believing success belongs to other people. Those beliefs had to come from somewhere. And that's exactly what today's masterclass is all about. So let me start by asking you something. Have you ever worked really hard, yet still felt as though you were running on the spot? Have you ever promised yourself, this time I'm really going to change, only to find yourself slipping back into the same habits, the same thinking and the same results? And have you ever wondered whether something invisible might be influencing your life without you even realizing it? If you answered yes to any of those questions, you're certainly not alone. In fact, I believe you've just identified one of the greatest hidden challenges in personal development. And by the end of today's masterclass, you'll understand why willpower isn't enough. You'll understand why motivation often fades, and you'll discover why so many intelligent, hardworking people continue repeating the same patterns year after year. And more importantly, I'll show you the first step to finally breaking free from it. I'd like you to imagine something. Imagine a person who was born inside a prison. They'd never seen the outside world. They've never known anything different. To them, those prison walls are simply normal life. Would they ever try to escape? Probably not, because they don't know there's anything beyond the walls. Now, think about that for a moment. I believe millions of people are living exactly like that. Not inside a physical prison, of course, but inside a mental one. The prison built from beliefs, assumptions, past experiences, opinions, and old stories they've repeated for years. The remarkable thing is that most people don't even realize they're living there. That's what I call it, the invisible prison, because you can't see it, you can't touch it, but every single day it's influencing your decisions, your confidence, your expectations, your relationships, your finances, your opportunities, and ultimately the direction of your life. Let me tell you a story. You've probably seen pictures of elephants at the circus or in the wildlife park. Magnificent animals, powerful, strong enough to pull down a tree and strong enough to move a truck. Yet many of them stand really quietly, held by nothing more than just a simple rope around one leg. No chains, no steel, just a rope. Now ask yourself, why doesn't the elephant simply just walk away? He easily could. The answer isn't physical, it's psychological. When that elephant was very young, that rope really could hold it. And I've seen this personally when I played a gig in a circus band once, and I've got to say, I didn't like what I saw. I thought it was heartbreaking. It pulled, it struggled, it fought with everything it had. Eventually, this poor little thing, it stopped trying. The elephant accepted a belief. This rope is stronger than I am. That was his belief. Years passed, the elephant became incredibly powerful, but the belief didn't change. The rope stopped controlling the elephant years ago, but the belief continued to do the job. Think about that for a moment. How many people are living exactly the same way? The circumstances changed years ago, but the belief never did. Maybe someone once told you, well, you'll never succeed. Maybe you failed once and decided, I'm just not good enough. Maybe someone laughed at your dream. Maybe someone convinced you that people like you don't become successful. And years passed. You grew, you learned, you gained experience, but the belief stayed exactly where it was. And without even realizing it, you began building your life around it. That is what many personal development teachers call a paradigm. I like to describe it differently. I call it the invisible prison, because until you become aware of it, it quietly writes the script of your life. And once you understand why, you'll never look at your own life the same way again. I'd like to share something really personal with you because understanding this changed my life forever. There was a time in my life when I genuinely believed that if I changed my circumstances, my life would automatically improve. Perhaps you've thought the same thing. If I had a different job, if I earned more money, if I lived somewhere else, if I met the right person, if I just had one good opportunity, then everything would finally come together. That's what I believed, and on the surface, it made perfect sense. I started my career, as you know, as a professional musician, and from the age of 13, I was already earning money performing. I was fortunate enough to work with some of the incredible artists over the years, and I loved being on the stage, but eventually, I felt there was another chapter waiting for me. So I made a big decision, and I left the music industry and stepped into the world of real estate. I honestly believed that this was my fresh start, new career, new opportunities, a different future. But something happened that completely surprised me. Although my environment had changed, my thinking hadn't. I still questioned myself. I still doubted myself. I still worried about making mistakes. I still wondered whether I was good enough. Can you relate to that by any chance? Have you ever found yourself starting something new, yet somehow carrying all your old fears with you? A new job, but the same self-doubt. A new relationship, but the same insecurity. A new opportunity, but the same hesitation. It was then that I realized something really profound. I hadn't changed the person creating my results. I'd only changed the scenery. Think about that for a moment. Changing the scenery doesn't change the script. Unless you rewrite the script, you'll often keep producing the same ending. That was the turning point in my life because from that moment on, I stopped asking, how do I change my circumstances? And I started asking, what beliefs are creating my circumstances? They're completely different questions. One keeps you searching outside yourself. The other starts changing you from the inside out. Now, let's talk about something that most people never really think about. Your subconscious mind. When people hear that phrase, they often imagine something really mysterious, something complicated. I don't. I think it's beautifully simple. Imagine buying a brand new smartphone, for instance. When you first switch it on, it already has an operating system installed. And that operating system determines how everything works, the apps, the settings, the notifications, everything. Now, imagine that operating system has a fault. You can keep buying new apps, you can change the wallpaper, you could even buy a new phone case if you want. But until the operating system changes, the problems keep returning. I believe our minds work in much the same way. Your conscious mind is like the screen. It's the part you use every day. It's where you make decisions, set goals, plan your future, build underneath. But underneath, there's another system quietly running, your subconscious mind. And that's what's fascinating. Your subconscious doesn't decide whether something is true. It decides whether something is familiar. And that's a huge difference. Most people assume their subconscious is judging them. It really isn't. It's simply protecting what it already knows. That's why change often feels really uncomfortable. Not because change is wrong, because change is unfamiliar. And the subconscious naturally prefers what feels familiar, even when familiar isn't serving you anymore. That's why someone can stay in a job they dislike for 20 years. Not because it's making them happy, because it's familiar. That's why people sometimes remain in unhealthy relationships. And people stay stuck financially. That's why they postpone dreams. The subconscious quietly whispers, stay where it's safe, even when safe is keeping you small. Have you ever noticed that the moment you decide to do something bigger, the doubts become louder? You decide to start a business. What if I fail? You think about speaking in public. Oh yeah, what if I embarrass myself? You consider writing a book. Who would read it? Those thoughts don't appear because you're incapable. They appear because you're stepping beyond what feels familiar. And one of the biggest breakthroughs I ever had, I realized that those thoughts weren't predicting my future. They were protecting my past. Just let that sink in for a moment. Your subconscious isn't trying to stop your success. It's trying to preserve your identity. That's its job. And until you can consciously create a new identity, it will keep pulling you back to the one it already knows. And that's why motivation on its own never lasts. Motivation can inspire action, but programming determines consistency. That's why people leave a seminar inspired and only to feel exactly the same a week later. They've changed their emotions, but they didn't change their programming. And that's exactly why awareness matters so much. Because the moment you become aware of the program that's running, you finally have a choice. You can continue living from yesterday's programming, or you can begin writing a new future. And that's exactly where I'd like to take you next. Because now that you understand how the subconscious really works, the obvious question becomes, how do I change it? The answer is much simpler than most people think. And in the final part of today's masterclass, I'm going to give you a practical process that you can actually begin using today. Not next year, not when life gets easier, today. Because freedom doesn't begin when your circumstances change. Freedom begins the moment you realize you no longer have to believe every program that's been running your life. So, if your subconscious has been quietly running the program, how do you begin changing it? The answer begins with one word: awareness. Because you can't change what you don't first recognize. Think about that. Think about if you're driving your car, if you realize you've taken the wrong road, what's the first thing you do? You don't panic, you don't give up, you simply become aware. Then you make a different choice. Life works exactly the same way. The moment you become aware that old belief is running your life, you've already taken the first step towards changing it. That's why I often say awareness creates transformation. Not because awareness magically changes your life overnight, although it can, but because awareness gives you something incredibly valuable, a choice. Until you're aware, your programming makes your decisions. Once you're aware, you begin making them. And that, my friends, is freedom. Now, I'd like to give you something practical. The next time you hear yourself thinking, I can't, I'm not good enough, I'll probably fail, I've always been this way. Don't argue with the thought, don't fight it. Simply just pause, take a breath, and ask yourself one simple question. Where did this belief come from? Not, why am I like this? Not, what's wrong with me? Simply ask, where did I first learn this? Because you'll often discover that the belief didn't begin with you. Perhaps it came from a teacher, a parent, a difficult experience, someone else's fear, someone else's limitation, something you accepted before you were old enough to question it. Think about that. Because if you learned it, you can unlearn it. That's one of the most hopeful truths that I know. You know, when I look back over my own life, I realized something. The biggest changes never happened because I found the perfect opportunity. They happened because I became willing to see myself differently. And looking back, I wish someone had really explained this to me much earlier. It would have saved me years of frustration, years of believing I had to work harder, when what I really needed was to think differently. That's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about sharing these ideas, because if today's conversation helps just one person stop limiting themselves and start believing in what's possible, then every minute we've spent together today has been totally worthwhile. So, here's my challenge for you. Over the next 7 days, I want you to become a student of your own thinking. Carry a notebook, if you will, or use the Notes app on your phone. Every time you catch yourself saying, I can't, I always, or I never, write it down. Don't judge yourself, just notice it. Then ask yourself, is this true? Really true? Or is this simply an old program I've never questioned? You'll be amazed how often those old recordings appear. And every time you notice one, just smile. Because awareness means you're no longer trapped inside it. You're beginning to step outside the prison, one thought at a time. Before we finish, I'd like you to imagine something. Imagine standing in front of a prison door, right? For years, you believed it was locked. You pushed against it once, maybe twice, then you stopped trying. You accepted this is just the way life is. But today, someone hands you a key. You place it in the lock and you turn it and the door opens, and suddenly you realize something extraordinary. The prison was real, but so was the exit. The door had been there all along. You simply didn't know you had the key. Think about that for a moment. Awareness is the key. The moment you become aware, the door begins to open. The moment you question old belief, its power begins to fade. The moment you choose a new way of thinking, you take your first step towards freedom. And that's exactly what I want for you. Not a perfect life, not a life without challenges, but a life where your future is no longer controlled by yesterday's programming. Because your past may have influenced you, but it doesn't have to define you. Your programming may have shaped you, but it doesn't have to imprison you. Your story isn't finished. In many ways, it's only just beginning. If today's masterclass has helped you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and answer this question. What's the one old belief you're choosing to leave behind today? I generally read all the comments, and I'd love to know. If you know someone who's working hard yet still feels stuck, share this masterclass with them. It might be exactly the conversation they need. And if you're new to the John Williams Global community, I'd love to welcome you every week. We explore timeless principles that help you transform your mindset, strengthen your self-image, and become the person you're truly capable of becoming. You'll also find a collection of no-cost resources in my website, johnwilliamsglobal.com/resources, and in the description below. These no-cost resources are designed to help you put these principles into practice. And if you're ready to go much deeper and really invest in yourself, I'd love to invite you to explore Magnetic Manifestation Program. It's a complete step-by-step system for reprogramming your subconscious mind, transforming your identity, and creating lasting change from the inside out. I'd love to welcome you inside. And for a short time, the cost is only $297. In our next masterclass, we're going to answer a question that could change the way you see your entire life. Who programmed your mind? Where did your beliefs really come from? And more importantly, how do you stop living from someone else's programming and begin creating your own? I think you'll find it really fascinating. Remember, awareness creates transformation. Once you become aware, you can choose. Once you choose, you begin to change. Now, when you change, your life changes with you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Until next time, keep growing, keep believing, and become the person you were born to be. This is John Williams reminding you that your vision, your beliefs, and your emotions are shaping your future right now. Choose wisely, live abundantly, keep dreaming big, and I'll see you in the next John Williams Global Masterclass. Take care.